Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Guide to B2B Podcasting. Today, we're going to be talking all about podcast SEO. So when I talk about podcast SEO, we'll talk in future episodes about trying to create SEO content derived from your podcast interviews. That's a whole different tactic. When I talk about podcast SEO today, I'm talking about getting your podcast to rank high in the podcast directories like Apple, Spotify, and other directories. Some people are trying to coin the term podcast visibility optimization. So if you see PVO out there anyway, that is what podcast visibility optimization is. Similar thing, it's just SEO rankings of your podcast, how it ranks, what keywords does it show up for within Apple, Spotify, and other podcasting apps. So to start off, the thing to know about podcast SEO is that it is like SEO in 2005. It's very basic. It's very simple. It's very not mature, and hopefully it gets better because right now it's, as you'll see throughout this episode, we're in the keyword stuffing days. There's no other way to put it. But I'll walk you through what that means and how you can kind of utilize this to your advantage and just some things to consider as you go into this. So we're going to dive in and I'll kind of walk you through all the aspects of podcast SEO. So first thing to know is that really the two apps you're going to optimize for are Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And what I'll say is that those two, they each have different ways that they work. They have different rating systems. Those impact things differently. You might rank better in some than others. And there's some subtle differences between each of them, which I'll dive into, but it's really the same kind of fundamental ideas work well for both. So the first and most important part of your podcast SEO is going to be the name of your show. And this is unfortunately how these directories really work. And so, this is something we always kind of are talking to people with about whenever they're coming up with the brand and the strategy for their show, is that if you want to rank for the target keyword, your industry keyword, then you probably want to build your show around this. So I'll give you a great example of what I mean when your podcast show name. So one of our shows that ranks really well, it's a show called Hospitality Leaders. It ranks number 1 on Apple and Spotify for the keyword hospitality. And so that is great because anyone who's in the hospitality industry, hotel services, event services, if they're looking for hospitality podcasts, they are going to find that. Now, when we were brainstorming their show, they had a bunch of really clever ideas that were kind of like hotel related. I can't recall them off the top of my head, but this is a common thing. People will come up with some clever idea for a name that might be like industry jargon or industry slang, something along those lines. But we advised our client Upshift to go toward Hospitality Leaders as the name of the show because we believed that it was possible for them to rank number 1 for these keywords, and ultimately they have. And so what this is leading now is to organic traffic to that podcast because anyone who's searching for that keyword hospitality is going to see their show. So this is a really key point when you're starting your show is you want to think about a name that's going to be searchable, something that is going to be useful. Another podcast we run is the Meta Business Innovation and Technology podcast. Now, they came to us with this name, but it actually ended up being a great name for the podcast. First of all, they rank very high for anyone who searches for Meta. So again, a very big keyword. This is phenomenal for basically just search rankings and people finding anything around that keyword. But we also rank for innovation and business innovation because those are high keywords within the title of it as well. And so with that show, because again, the name is something that is kind of has keywords in it, it ranks really, really well. We have another client, Meridian Compensation Partners. They're executive compensation consultants. So they work with Fortune 500s to do consulting on executive compensation plans. We called their show the Executive Compensation Podcast. You search executive compensation, it's a small niche, but surprisingly, their show is actually getting far more traffic than I expected, and it is ranking number 1 for the keyword executive compensation, which you may think, who searches for that? But for people that are in this world, all the committees, all the professionals that are around this, it is actually a very highly trafficked topic for them. And so again, by calling it the Executive Compensation Podcast, they rank number 1 for that keyword. Now, I'll say that does not mean you have to go with this. And there's other things we can do to optimize the keywords, but I'll give you an example here. We have a customer, Ironclad. They're a legal software. And their host is this woman, Mary O'Carroll, who basically is like her personal brand. She's kind of like a spokesperson for the company, and her personal brand is she wears pearls all the time. And so she called her show Pearls On, Gloves Off. So it's very clever. It's very about her. She's kind of a celebrity in the legal industry, and people recognize and they knew what that show is. And the show is actually doing really well and has a good following. It has subscribers, listeners. It's performing well. But in terms of organic rankings, it is not. It does not have much organic traffic, anything like that, that's really coming to the show because the name is not really optimized for search. So what do you do if you do want to kind of be clever with your name, or say you don't want to just keyword stuff the name of your show? Well, so one of the things you can do is you can say, pearls on, gloves off, legal operations podcast. You can look at, or kind of keywords that you can kind of put as a hyphen on the back end in the actual name of your show. You don't have to actually put that in the artwork of it, but if you're reading that on the directory, it would say pearls on, gloves off, legal operations. It might be put that in the back end. And so it just kind of is almost like you're stuffing a keyword in there is really what you're doing. So I'll pull up another example of this, Hospitality Leaders podcast. Yes, we got them ranking #1 for hospitality, but we also got them ranking for more as well. So if you look here at the Apple Podcasts, if you're watching this on video, and if not, I'll just kind of describe it here. The actual show of the name in the podcast directories is Hospitality Leaders, interviews with hotel, event, and food service experts. This show now ranks in the top 3 for hotel, event, and food service on top of hospitality. So we actually have this ranking for 3 to 4 keywords now, because we did that same exact thing where after the hyphen, you basically kind of stuff some keywords into the title. You try to still make it look professional, but by doing this, you're actually going to get your show to show up for more results. So that is honestly one of the most important things, the name of your show, and getting that out there and what you put in there, that is going to be massive for these search results. Now, the other thing I'll say though, is there's a few other factors that are going to play into this, but the other thing that determines the ranking of a show is how popular it is. So Apple and Spotify, the more downloads your show gets, the higher the ranking is going to go. And so what that means is you also need your own organic promotion for this show. That means some of the biggest things, we have entire other episodes that are diving into podcast promotion, and we'll be doing a lot more in the future. But we're going to be looking at things like newsletters, a phenomenal way, probably one of the best owned media channels in terms of getting podcast downloads. If you have a company newsletter, get your podcast on it. Every time you release a new episode, try to get that out to your newsletter. That is going to do wonders to get your show consistent downloads and show Apple and Spotify that your show is popular, that people are listening. Obviously, sharing it out on social media is going to go a long way. Getting your guests to promote the show will go a long way. Those are just some key things that are going to be really important, just trying to get listeners coming from not just organic search into your show. The other thing is you're going to need some level of consistency. As long, it does not need to be weekly. Some people will tell you weekly. I've talked in other shows all about the frequency that you should podcast in B2B. I think every other week or monthly is just fine for a B2B show, but you do need to be publishing consistently. If your show goes dead for months on time, you're probably going to see a pretty significant drop in those rankings. So again, the name, super important, but then also just the overall performance, how popular your show is. And the more popular it gets, the more it goes up the rankings, and it just kind of creates this cycle, this upward spiral for the podcast. Other things that will impact it is your ratings, your 5-star ratings on Apple and Spotify. So for Apple, very easy, just getting people to go in there to review the podcast. With Spotify, they actually require that you listen to at least a few minutes of the podcast before you rate and review it, which is probably a smart idea. So what are ways that you can get 5-star reviews? Very simple things. One is ask your entire company and team to go leave a review. That will do a tremendous boost. I'm saying, like, if you have 20, 30, 50 reviews, you are going to be above a lot of shows out there that never really put effort behind getting reviews. So, dive in, leave some reviews from your side. Our team, Content Allies, we're constantly leaving reviews for our customers' podcasts as well, trying to help them boost that up as well. You can also ask your listeners to leave a review at the end of the podcast. It's up to you if you think it's valuable or not. Sometimes in the B2B space, that is not going to be the right call to make. You'd rather just kind of focus on another call to action. But sometimes in B2B, if you are really kind of creating a community-based show, it is not a bad idea to just ask for a 5-star review in there at the end of your episodes as well. And then again, just asking friends, family, heck, grab your spouse's phone, grab your kid's phone, your family member's phone, grab someone else, leave an extra review there. Like I said, a lot of people do not put enough focus on this. They're never intentional about this with your podcast. So even a moderate number of reviews is going to do a lot to get you boosting up those rankings very quickly. Now, the next aspects of the podcast, which we can call metadata, we can just call this the other writing associated with your podcast as well. We're going to look at things like, obviously we mentioned your show title is super important. Your publisher name, who that's from. So interesting thing that I found is, we produce podcasts for Siemens Energy, and because of that, it is produced by Siemens, or it's produced by Meta, or it's produced by General Dynamics, whoever that would be. If your publisher is your company name, and your company name is highly trafficked, this is a phenomenal, honestly, a way to kind of get traffic there. What we've honestly found is, especially for a lot of large enterprises, we've seen this for Alibaba, for General Dynamics, for Meta, Siemens, like there's people searching for your company name in the podcast. Those could be employees. Those could be people interested in your company or one of the various divisions you have. But large brands often have a lot of traffic on their own name. And so making sure that your publisher is not your podcast production agency, but it is, and it's not the individual at the company, but the publisher is the company itself. That is important when you're setting up your show. So there's going to be a who's this show by. You would put, by Meta, not by John Doe, who happens to work at Meta. You're going to put it by the actual company itself. So that's another important thing that does help a lot. This is really impactful, more so on Apple than it is on Spotify, but again, a really important thing there as well. The other thing I'll share is that episode titles are also really important to think about as well. What's interesting is when you search for podcasts within the directories, it doesn't just return shows. It also returns shows and episodes. Spotify mixes them in between. Apple's interface currently, it is kind of splits it up and saying, hey, here's show results, here's episode results. But again, your episode titles are a whole nother opportunity for search. Someone might be looking for a more niche topic. And so again, episode titles are a great place to kind of optimize individually as well. Within that, you're also going to have your show description. So when I talk about a show description, that is the overall description of your show. So when someone clicks in about your podcast, your show description, so you want to start trying to get keywords in there as well. So again, if we go to the hospitality leaders, and I'll show you again this kind of Apple podcast preview. Again, you're going to see that we're including hospitality, food service, event, things like that, those keywords within the podcast description. And that's going to help just ensure that basically you have a higher chance of ranking for those as well. And the last one, episode descriptions, probably lower on the priority list, but again, all going to be important in terms of getting your keywords out there as well. Now, the other thing I'll say is you're probably wondering, well, how do I know what people are even searching for? Well, there is a phenomenal tool out there called Voxelize, and it is pretty much the forerunner of podcast SEO. So if you're familiar with SEMrush or Ahrefs or any sort of SEO tools like this, Voxelize is essentially an SEO tool for podcasting. Now, the data that's out there, it's a bit limited now. It is definitely not as sophisticated as Ahrefs or SEMrush or anything like that. But for what they're building in the podcast space, this is who I've seen as the leaders out there, and really love what they're doing. So I would recommend checking out Voxelize. You're going to be able to go look at keywords, see what kind of traffic is out there, how difficult some keywords would be to pursue, and help you kind of just build a strategy for your show. Or you can contact a company like us, Content Allies, and we'll do a full analysis and optimize your show over time. We'll keep looking for more keywords, more opportunities to grow and optimize your show as we run it. Other thing to think about with podcast SEO is you're probably not going to nail this out of the gate with a new show. It's just like, as I said, popularity will get your show up there more. So if you're going to launch a new show, you're probably not going to rank really well for 3 to 6 months at least. And then after that window, once you've been kind of publishing consistently on a 6-month basis, by that point, we see if you've got a good show, you've done the reviews, you've done the keyword optimizations, even within 3 to 6 months, you can be at the top of your rankings. So, we've seen this. One of our customers, Tonkin, where they run the Modern Business Operations podcast. Great title, great keyword. We got them to the top of the keyword operations and top of business operations as keywords really within about a 6-month window. So you can go really far, really quickly. If you optimize this, you plan up front, and you're consistent in your publishing and you're promoting that show internally. They had a ton of great internal promotion, which got the show popular and helped this really boost up the rankings as well. So a few other final points that I'll hit on podcast SEO. It is hard to rank for more than, I would say, 3 to 4 keywords max. And that's one thing I always try to think. This is not something that is like a Google SEO strategy for a website where every article can be some new keyword that you pursue and you can be ranking for 100 plus keywords that are all driving traffic to your site. With a podcast, you're really likely going to rank for 1 to 2 core keywords. If you're lucky and you're in a non-competitive niche, you might be able to rank for 2 to 4 keywords at max. What we've done with hospitality leaders is a great example of one where we got them to rank for about 3 to 4 really great keywords. But I will say that is challenging. And not everybody can do that, or not everybody has those keywords. Because you also need to think, you have to think about keywords that people are searching for in a podcast directory. So, someone is not going into a podcast directory typically searching for a solution. So if you are a customer experience software, people aren't going there looking for customer experience software. They might be looking for customer experience or customer success or other things around that. And so that's kind of, you got to think that people are going to podcasts for topical stuff, not down funnel, targeted keywords, solutions, keywords, or buying intent keywords. So when you kind of optimize your keywords, you're going to look for what are those high level topical things that people may search for, and that's what you want to optimize your show around. Pick one core one to go after, 2 to 3 maybe secondary keywords, and then optimize your show and your strategy around that. Last thing I'll say out there is a possible black hat tactic. We don't really recommend this or do this anymore at Content Allies, but I've seen people do this, is paying for reviews. There are sites out there where you can pay people to review your podcast. Not a huge fan of this. I think it's could get your hand slapped in the future if any of these sites get eventually shut down or something by Apple or Spotify. Then that would probably not be ideal, and they would probably start to devalue or almost flag accounts. So I'm always against black hat tactics. Not a fan of that. But I think the white hat version of this is just ask everybody at your company to leave a review for the show. Ask your friends, ask your colleagues, ask your content or your podcast agency to leave reviews. If you do that, and you've got a decently sizable company, you're going to get, I would say, easily a good 20, 30, 40 reviews just out of all of those people together. And if you can get that many, that's going to be a lot to get you going and get you started. All right. Final thing I want to leave you with is that podcast SEO is a moving target. I'm recording this going into Q4 of 2022. And as I said today, we are looking at very much a keyword stuffing world of podcast SEO. But I expect that to grow, and I expect that to change. If someone told you in 2005 that you just stuffed a bunch of keywords into your website and you could rank, that was true. Today, it's not that easy. So I really expect the space of podcast SEO to grow and develop, and we'll keep more episodes coming out if there's more developments, more sophistication in the space. But for the time being, take these things, the key things, get your title on point. Try to add some other keywords into your title behind a hyphen if the name of your show is already decided. That's probably the quickest, fastest tactic. 5 minutes, go hop into your podcast hosting company, change the name of your show, add some keywords behind the title, and you're going to see probably a pretty significant jump in your rankings there already. Make sure you're promoting it. Make sure you're getting 5-star reviews. Get your keywords inside your titles, your descriptions, everything like that. And then last, check out Voxelize if you want to do a bit more research and get deeper into this. So that's what I've got for you guys today. If you guys have any questions, reach out to us at contentallies.com. We are one of the leading B2B podcast production agencies out there. We produce podcasts for Meta, Siemens Energy, Alibaba.com, Gusto, General Dynamics, quite a few different companies out there. And so we are really taking the charge and focusing on B2B podcasting in this space. We're not giving B2C advice. We're giving it straight to here for B2B podcasters. This is who we're trying to help. And so if you've got a B2B podcast, you want to grow it, reach out to us at contentallies.com.